All right, guys, we've been talking about the French Revolution, on the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. Where we stopped yesterday was that the sans-culottes had begun to take over the poor people who hated social class distinction. They had broken into the jails and committed the September massacre, killing 1,200 people. And then Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette were almost safe when they were arrested, and both of them will be executed. So at this point, France declares war on pretty much all of Europe, Spain, the Netherlands, Great Britain, and they're facing an internal civil war as well. So things are not good. So from the fall of 1793 to the summer of 1794, about 9-10 months is known as the Reign of Terror, where 40,000 French people are going to be beheaded. And this new government is going to be run by two committees. Number one is the Committee of Public Safety. Their job was to keep France safe from enemies of the revolution inside of France, in internal France. I liken the Committee of Public Safety to like the FBI. The FBI's job is to make sure the United States is safe from internal threat. The other committee is the Committee of General Security. Now, its job I liken to the CIA, and I'm not saying the CIA and the FBI do these things. It's just to give you an American kind of perspective. The CIA and the Committee of General Security, their job is to protect France from external threat. Like the CIA is to protect the United States from external threats outside the country. Committee of Public Safety and Committee of General Security were the two big heavyweights. Now, as this new constitution where every man has the right to vote is created, immediately all the basic rights and privileges guaranteed by it are suspended. So yes, you have the right to freedom of speech, you have the right to freedom of religion, but oh wait, we're at war, so we're going to clamp down on those. So wartime is the greatest time whenever to suspend people's freedom of civil liberties. And so here we have the guillotine, where you were brought in, you're laid down on a board, and this triangular shaped, wedge comes down and bunks off your head into a basket. This is going to be the method of capital punishment in France. The guy who developed it thought that it was humane because it was quick and painless. Yow. All right. So heading the Committee of Public Safety is a guy named Maximilien Robespierre. And the Committee of Public Safety is going to be the bigger, the stronger of the two, the internal France one. And Robespierre's job is to find out enemies of the revolution and this new government within France. And Maximilien Robespierre was a moderate middle-class guy. Early on, he was against the violence of the revolution. As a matter of fact, as a young boy studying at school, he was actually able to read a letter to the then King Louis XIV. And his job is to oversee the safety of the revolution inside of France. And so what he is able to do, he presides over a tribunal, which you have a series of 3 judges, and a case is brought before you, and it's, a majority vote. Two guilty votes to 1, and you're guillotined. 2 innocent votes to 1, and you are let go. Well, Robespierre is in charge of these, and he sits on many of these tribunals himself, and it's here that the megalomania, the power that he has, turns into like a bloodlust, and it changes him into a crazy person. So after executing many people inside of Paris, he leaves Paris and he goes out into the provinces, out into the countryside. He's looking for people in towns and villages and finding them guilty. He gets great powers that allow him to do pretty much anything. By 1794, he's back in Paris, and he sicks the tear loose on political figures. Rivals, real or imagined, to his power are taken and executed. In the spring of 1794, he even targets the leading rabble-rousers of the sans-culottes and has them executed. Then, like a Joseph Stalin and an Adolf Hitler, he turns the tear loose on his own supporters, anybody who could threaten his power. And then on June 10th, he is able to get a law passed that he can convict anybody without any evidence. If Robespierre says they're guilty, they are guilty. You don't need any evidence whatsoever. And then a little over 2 weeks later, he goes into the National Constituent Assembly and says, you know, members of the Assembly, I need some help. There is a threat inside of France to the revolution. Those in charge of the government are our enemies. Those in charge of the government want to thwart us. I need you to pass a law allowing me to execute members of the government. Now, who is he saying this to? Anyone? Exactly. He is telling the government of France that they need to pass a law allowing him to convict and execute them. And they're like, hang on a second. Robespierre, let me ask you this, brother. So you want us to pass a law allowing you to arrest and behead people of the government of France? Correct, sir. Well, Robespierre, let me think about that. Why don't we take a little walk down the road and let's talk about this. Come on here, Robespierre. And they get him outside the chamber and they immediately have him arrested. Robespierre wanted them to pass a law allowing him to convict and execute them. Robespierre is going to be arrested. And, you know, here it is. Going back to the beginning of this, it's always easier to get rid of democratic practices during a crisis, in times of war. And the government of France had felt that they had established a republic of civic virtue that would thrive instead of being corrupt. And Robespierre then goes crazy. There was never a defined enemy of the state, other than being a member of the royal family or being wealthy. Right? So these tribunals were set up, they interrogated people, and they were found guilty. They start in 1793, and by mid-1794, things are going crazy. And in July of 1794, Robespierre will be guillotined. He is done. And so that is the end of the Reign of Terror. Here's Robespierre, that cool kind of swept back. He doesn't look like a scary guy, but mentally he just turns and goes insane. So from 1793, as we're saying, to 1794, the Reign of Terror led to the death of 40,000 French citizens. Due to the tremendous horrors inflicted by Robespierre, the internal civil war ends. The war with Europe is stalemate. It's not going great, but it's not going bad. And the French are going to create yet again another new government. This government was created in the Constitution of 1795, another new constitution, and it was written by a five-man government known as the Directory. All right, the Directory by 5 old guys. Now, as members of this new government, it has a 2-house legislature, an upper house and a lower house, like the United States and the British Parliament. And this new government is governed by males who own property. Right? They severed ties with the crazy sans-culottes, and they sought peace with France's European allies. So at the beginning of all this, we had a king who was an absolute monarch, and the Estates General run by old rich guys. Now, at the end of it, we have a government of old rich guys. So the French government really hasn't changed all that much. Now, the Directory governs France for 5 years, from 1795 to 1799. it was weak. It really didn't work like the Articles of the Confederation for the United States, and there's still a lot of discontent amongst the poor people. They were starving. As they're starving, the Directory becomes rich. And so once again, as members of the sans-culottes bring in people and they start food riots, the Directory says, we've got to bring in someone that people will listen to, and they bring in a military hero. This guy defeated Austria in the French battles of the French Revolution, and he is able to capture and kick the British out of some ports. So he is a hero, and his name is Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon has his own ideas on how he wants to unite France under the ideas of nationalism, where the people of France would be the most important, not the symbolic king and the symbolic queen. So here we go. An artillery general takes over, and he's emperor within 2 years. Now, from 1799 to 1815, Napoleon is a major force to be reckoned with outside, throughout all of Europe. He was a 20-year-old lieutenant in the army who rises throughout the French Revolution. In 1793, he's able to defeat the British, and he drives them out of key ports in France. And in 1799, as I said, he defeats powerful Austria in a series of battles. So he is named the new general of the French army. And he is able to overthrow the Directory and had a new constitution written. So yet the Directory is gone, and another new constitution of France is written. He has them, the new constitution, declare him to be the consul of France for life, hearkening back to the days of ancient Rome, where he is elected as a consul. In 1804, he is declared the Emperor of France when he is crowned by the Pope in Notre Dame. Now, Napoleon does do some good things. Trying to mend ties with the Catholic Church, he invites the Pope to come to Notre Dame to crown him emperor. But just as the Pope was about to place the crown on his head, Napoleon shoots up, grabs the crown, and crowns himself, symbolically showing that he was in charge, not anybody else. And on his rise to power, Napoleon had the French citizens voting for him. He told them, he informed them every step of the way of what he was going to do. And so he is able to modernize parts of France. He opened schools to boys and girls. He demanded a trustworthy, educated government. And he had some excellent military officials. He promotes the ideas of public education, and he builds hospitals, and he achieves peace with the Catholic Church. But then, he's a military guy, and he builds an army called La Grande Armée, the Big Army. And he takes on all the combined powers of Europe, defeating many of them. And you'll see that impacting the revolutions in Latin America. You know, defeating Spain and Portugal. And Napoleon transforms France to an empire of its greatest size in history. But his zest, his zeal to control the continent wasn't enough. And in 1805, he attacks England. And he gets in the famous Battle of Trafalgar off the coast of Spain, and he is defeated. And the defeat of the French Navy prevents Napoleon from invading England. So he tries to blockade their ports, and he simply just couldn't do it. The British Navy was too much. And then in June of 1812, he leads a disastrous attack in Russia. He goes into Russia with 600,000 men. And the Russians do what they always do. They back up, come on, come on. They kill their livestock, they poison their wells, they burn their crops. They come on, come on. As they retreat deeper into the vastness of Russia, they wait until it gets cold. And Napoleon's army is going to freeze to death. He goes in with 600,000. He makes it out with barely 100,000 soldiers in his big first defeat. So in 1813, he is defeated, and he was forced to step down from the throne of France. And he's exiled to a little island in the Mediterranean Sea called Elba. And King Louis XVII, the 16th young son, the baker's baby boy, is reinserted as the king of France. So we started with the king, we overthrew the king, we beheaded the king, we wound up with an emperor, Napoleon, we kick him off the throne, and we wind up with the king again after like 7 different constitutions. France just clearly doesn't get it. Now, as Louis XVII is back, an economic depression, even worse, hits France. Napoleon is able to escape exile, and he returns. And there's this great story of him marching on, Paris, and his army meets him in the mountains, and he stands, "I am here to lead you, but if you need to shoot me, shoot. Don't hit any of my people." And the guys this mountain pass shoot their guns and close their eyes, and when they open them back up, Napoleon is standing there, bullet holes through his clothes, but not one touches him, and he triumphantly returns back to Paris. However, he's only in power for about 100 days, when on June 18th, he loses the famous Battle of Waterloo, headed up by the Duke of Wellington from Great Britain and a host of other European allies. Napoleon will lose this famous Battle of Waterloo, but just barely. People talk of Napoleon as getting a beat down. He takes on and almost defeats pretty much all of Western Europe, not once, but twice. And so he is exiled once again, this time into the small island of St. Helena, like off the coast of Africa in the Atlantic, where he dies in 1821. But what Napoleon does is he brings the spirit of nationalism to Europe, about people being excited and united behind their own history and their own ideas, not a king and a queen. And he shows the power of France fully mobilized for warfare. So here, outside of Brussels, Belgium, was called the Lion's Mount. The Duke of Wellington, the British line, is up here. And you can see this flat farmland, and it looks pretty much today like it did back in those days. Oh, what's going on? All right, there we go. You go up these steep steps, you got a commanding view. You'll see when we get up here. So here's Napoleon. And as you're standing on top of the Lion's Mound, Napoleon's forces gathered all throughout here, and this mound is kind of man-made. It's not exactly the way it was. And the Duke of Wellington saw Napoleon's armies coming at him. Napoleon was in a little farmhouse just off here, and you can see his men have no cover. There's nowhere for them to run. Boy, that guy is handsome. And they came on and on and on up this steep hill, and the Duke of Wellington turned to his aide and said, "Give me our allies, give me Blucher, an allied general coming, or if he's not here in 2 minutes, give me the knife. I'm going to have to take myself out because Napoleon is coming." And it was a gallant charge. You can see this guy laying here, but it was not enough, and Napoleon is defeated. But here is where the revolutions are going to boomerang from the United States over to France. Now they're going to come back, and tomorrow we're going to look at Latin America. First we're going to start in the island of Haiti, and then go to South America and talk about 2 Jedis. One I really like, whose name is Simon Bolivar, and the other guy is Jose de San Martin. So we'll talk about those guys tomorrow, and I'll see you then.